Cool. We're back with all the excitement that objects have to offer us. The again the real idea here is that we're going to be combining both code that has functionality and data into one thing. So the way that we do that is we create something called a class, and the class is the core idea of what this object is and everything that it has inside of it. So everything sort of descends from that. So going back to this Platonic ideal sort of notion, you've got the idea of a chair. And a chair has certain attributes. A chair has something you put your butt on. It's got something that connects to the floor. Sometimes it has a back. Sometimes it has arms. Sometimes it has three legs. Sometimes it has one with wheels. Sometimes it has four. Sometimes it's made out of wood. Sometimes it's plastic. Sometimes it's metal. It could be heavy. It could be lightweight. It could be uncomfortable. All these different attributes, they can descend from this one class. Now, we aren't going to make a chair that's kind of complicated. Instead, we're just going to make a ball that bounces around, and then we'll start to build up to something more robust from there. So, conventionally, when you create a class, you give it a name with a, you start out its name with a capital letter. And that's just so you don't confuse it with something else, a function or some other method. So now I've got my class ball. And what I want to do is I want to create inside of here this thing that I mentioned before called a constructor. And a constructor, there we go. Constructor gets called when we first create an instance of a new ball. So every time we want a new ball, we call the constructor. The constructor gives all of its attributes to the ball, and then we've got our ball off and doing its thing. So inside of the constructor, all the different things that we need in order to get this ball to move around on screen. It'll also have so it'll have the location, the initial location, as well as subsequent locations, its speed. We could put something in here for color and size. So I think what I'll do is I'm just going to start out with speed, right, and location, and we do this by saying with there's a keyword here called this. This is a keyword that identifies that the variable that we're identifying here is local to the individual object that it is associated with. So this is not a global thing. It's not local. It's kind of a different thing. It then becomes part of that object when we create it and instantiate it. So I'm going to say width divided by 2. Then I'll say this dot ypos equals height divided by 2. Right? Ypos. Now the other thing that we want to have inside of here is this x speed. And we'll do we'll go back to our friend random. Say -2, 2. And then we'll do, I forgot. It's this dot x speed, right? And then we do this dot y speed, and we'll make that random as well. The other thing that I'll do here, just for future proofing this, is I'm going to say this dot diam, right? So diameter of our ball, right? We'll say 100. Great. So these are the things that are part of every object that we create: size, location, speed, right? These are universal attributes, and they can vary, right? As we see here in the speed, they can vary in as they're created. So now we want to get into the sort of like functionality of these things, right? So inside of here, remember we've got the data. Now we want the functionality. And the functionality, we're creating functions, but these functions are identified a little bit differently, right? So we're going to do this, and I'm going to have one called move, And move is going to be the thing that like updates the or actually like increments the position, increments or decrements the position, right? So so move, and you'll notice I don't say function or anything like that. I just say move, right? So this dot x equals this plus equals, sorry, x pos, sorry, x pos plus equals x speed. Man, I will learn how to spell and type one day. So so now what we're doing is we're saying update the x position of our object with this speed, and then we're going to do the same thing with y. Right? And now I'm going to say update, and this is going to be where I check to see, actually I'll say, well, I'll call this wall check. Right? So now and maybe I'm going to rename this just for clarity. So update is going to be the thing that updates its position. Wall check is going to be the bit that checks to see if we're hitting a wall, right? So I'm going to say if this dot x is greater than or equal to with minus this dot diameter divided by 2. That gives us the radius, right? So this means it's when it bounces, it's going to bounce off the side of the ball. It's not going to bounce off of the center of it. Or this dot, it's x pos, sorry. This x pos is less than or equal to this dot diam divided by 2. Then what we want to do is we want this dot x speed to equal negative this dot x speed. Right, so if we just throw that negative sign in front, it just inverts it. So if it's positive, it becomes negative. If negative, it becomes positive, right? And I'm going to copy this and paste it here. So I'm going to say y pos greater than equal to height, then y pos, this is all good, and then y speed, right? So now I've got something, we'll just pull this out here so it all becomes a little bit neater. So here, we've got our constructor, this is our data, we've got update, this is part of our functionality, we've got wall check, this is also part of our functionality, and now we're going to have one last one, we'll call this render. And so this is where we will, this is where we're actually going to draw our ellipse, right? So I'll say ellipse, x pos, y pos, diameter. Oops, sorry, I forgot. This x pos, this y pos, this diameter. There we go. Okay, great. So now I've got, this is a complete class. I've called it a class. I've got a constructor. I've got where it's got various attributes: diameter, position, speed. I've got functionality in here: methods, update, wall check, and render. So now what I want to do is I want to actually create my first my object, right? So I'm going to say let sphere. So this is my global variable sphere. This is going to become the instance of class ball. It's going to become my object, right? The way that I do that inside of setup, I'm going to say sphere equals new ball. So what I'm doing here is I say, okay, when I call sphere, I say new ball, and what I'm really doing is I'm saying, hey, class ball, call the constructor, right? And so then as soon as we call this, what happens is we get a diameter, we get an x and y position, and then we get you can think of this almost as like the ball setup, right? A random x and y speed, right? So all that gets fixed here inside of our new ball called sphere. So when we want to actually do something inside of our function, when we want to draw this now, or in the draw function, we want to draw this, we do it by calling these various functionalities of sphere, right? So I do that by saying, so every time I refer to sphere, I'm referring to this one instance of this class ball, this object called sphere. So now I can say sphere dot update, and this will update its location. Then I can say sphere wall check. And that'll check to see if it should bounce or not. And then I can say sphere dot render. R-E-N-D-E-R. There we go. Right. So now, when I save this and I run it, now I've got a ball bouncing around on screen. So this ball right here, this is called sphere, and it's updating, it's checking the wall, and it's rendering every time we go through this loop. So, so my actual code that I'm writing is pretty small, right? I had to do all this work, and we'll talk about why all this work was actually useful in a minute. It's not busy work. It's an actually useful thing. But this is going to be the foundation for object-oriented programming moving forward. It makes it so that you can make some really easy changes inside of here that would affect every other instance of the ball class that exists on screen. We'll take a look at that in just a minute when we get two or more of these things bouncing around on screen with just a few lines of code. We don't need to go through all of this all over again. So come back, enjoy, it's exciting stuff.